There's just such a lack of trust these days, and for good reason, because we don't necessarily believe what we read because we know AI might have written it. We don't even know if a human even proofread it before it was published. And we see photographs and even videos, and they look realistic. They look like the people they purport to be, but we'll see them of long past people. I saw one of Michael Jackson not so long ago. Obviously not him, is not here anymore. It's kind of fun and exciting to watch, but it's also terrifying because we don't trust what we see.
Taking a minute to be myself, don't need no help. We keep on rising.
Okay, welcome back. This is Connie Davis, your hostess with Unlocking Commerce and Business. Really excited about the episode today. It's one that's really meaningful to me, mainly because of the communities that I spend a lot of time in. And today's guest, we have a lot in common, I think, in that area. So we're going to be talking about the contractor out there somewhere right now, hauling material, managing a crew, bidding jobs, and their phone not ringing. And not because their work is bad, but because nobody can find them. And my guest today, Wes Towers, who's the creator and mind behind Uplift 360, is here to talk with us about that. So, welcome to the show, Wes.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Connie, for making the time for us to connect and to speak to you and your audience.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the work that you do because you're in a niche industry. You're doing something that's very common over here in the US, and I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your story, the part of the world that you serve. But I think even on that other side of the world that we can hear the accent, you're coming from
Yeah.
Australia.
Yes.
Um, it's just
Yeah.
so common for, this particular area of the industry. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into what you're doing and what caused you to
Yeah.
build Uplift 360.
Yeah. So as you say, so I'm from Australia. Everyone can hear my accent. So I'm just just outside of Melbourne, down on the coast near Bells Beach. If there's any surfers out there, we're kind of halfway between Bells Beach and Melbourne. But anyway, yeah, so I run a digital agency, Uplift 360, as you mentioned, and we serve trades, construction people primarily as our niche market. And so it wasn't always that way, but I started an agency which was kind of generalist, and I realized the majority of our better clients were in similar fields in terms of construction and trades and some industrial brands, those sorts of people. And it's kind of funny. People assume that I had a trade background or a construction background. I didn't. I'm kind of useless at picking up a hammer or I don't know what end of a screwdriver to hold. I'm really useless at all that kind of handiwork. But for whatever reason, I really related well to these people, the founder-led businesses who are, often starting out with a skill set, just like I did, started with a skill set, are learning to develop in the business and how to grow the business and so on. And so we all have gaps in our knowledge, and certainly running the business over 20 years, I had lots of gaps in the early phases and figured out lots of things the hard way. But yeah, we serve clients to help them show up, get found, and so they can grow their business and grow attract the right kind of customers into their world, so they can get repeat business and leave a legacy. So build something worthwhile for their families. So yeah, it's been a wild journey, and it's a really wild journey right now, obviously with AI and all of the disruption, but also everything going on in the world right now. I mean, we all hear different announcements from day to day. It's turbulent times for a whole lot of reasons, and that echoes through business throughout the world. Certainly Australia is feeling impact, but everyone is. I speak to a lot of people all around the world, and businesses have challenges right now, and we're helping any way we can to get through those challenges, and so they can continue to thrive even in these terrible times.
Mm. You said a few words that really, really resonate with the audience listening to this show that we've been kind of growing by. And, we talk about some of the hard things. We talk about, some of the conversations not everybody likes to have, certainly not the fashionable conversations that are like the glitzy keywords. But we talk about real stuff. And that's really what I picked up
Yeah,
on, is you're like, I want to talk with the real guys out there doing the work that are just, busting their butts to get things, created and done and move business through their communities. for
Yeah.
their families. And you use the word legacy, and legacy is so important for so many people. Um,
Yeah.
and it's really the ones that it matters for. So let's talk a little bit about, just what you're seeing, macro trends, why, you know,
Yeah.
there's such a need for this particular industry for your services and how you're really filling that gap.
Yeah, well, I suppose our industry hasn't served the trades and construction businesses all that well historically, and it's a number of reasons. Um, Firstly, you tend to avoid what you don't understand. We all do that. So, practical, pragmatic, hands-on people who work out in the field and on the tools, and potentially that's how they started. Maybe they're more of a management type position now, but you tend to avoid what you don't understand. And so marketing and online marketing and, websites and social media and all that kind of stuff, it's not their natural habitat. So, um, and the problem with what I perceive that the way in which we web developers and designers and marketers would approach these people is use a whole lot of lingo. And I think that's a common trap for lots of businesses. You start to use lingo that people don't understand, and um, it just doesn't help anybody. So I just have a different approach in that I'm really practical and pragmatic and hands-on, and try to avoid all the lingo and just try and find out in real terms what makes a business tick. Because if I understand what the values and core convictions of the founder are, they're probably reflected throughout the business. So if I can have a conversation around what the founder really values and likes in the business and what the points of distinction are, then we can market to those points of distinction. Because realistically, everyone's speaking about your industry, whatever that might be. You say you're an electrician, everyone's speaking about electrical works in general terms, but only you can speak to the specifics of what you value and why you're building authority and trust and reputation in your community, which is super important. It's changing a lot. So you mentioned what's sort of changing in marketing. For a while now, we've thought about marketing with a sales funnel. So the concept was you would have like a lead funnel. And so you would capture lots of leads at the top and you would whittle them down through lots of different touch points. It might be email marketing. It might be all sorts of things you might send physical mail to. But most of it was online, but you would whittle them down until they would be a customer or a client, and that would be the end goal. But I don't think
Hmm.
that's the right way to think about it anymore. I think that the client or the customer isn't the end of the process. They're really the beginning. Because when you've got a quality customer and you serve them at a high level, you want to create them into a raving fan. And if they're a raving fan, well, they're actually at the top of the cycle again. So I like to think of it less linear and trying to almost trick people into your world, but think about how do we repurpose the great work we've done for this client. So it might be about getting a Google review or another review platform. It might be getting a case study or a story or an example or a video. Testimonial is powerful if you can do that. But to repurpose the actual projects you're working on into your website so other people can see it and say, oh, there's someone just like me who's had a product or a service delivered that's just like I want to have delivered. These trades and construction businesses are often sitting on a gold mine. It's just about repurposing the actual project work into quality content to attract more people just like them. So that's the way I like to think about it, more cyclical rather than the end project, the end task of a marketing funnel is the client. That's just the beginning of the next cycle. So that's the way I like to think about it, and it really resonates well with our clientele because all of a sudden marketing is not so confusing anymore. There's a simple strategy that we can follow.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about like the plumbers that have years of experiences. They've got definitely the hands-on experience. They've got, or you've got a roofer that's never really had an unhappy customer. You might have
Yeah,
an electrical contractor that literally can touch all of the homes in their community that they've probably touched or done work in. And that's a lot. And then you mentioned trust. So you said,
yeah,
it's like, how do I really capitalize on the trust of that exchange of service, which is their value in the community, but
yeah,
it's the digital barrier that is keeping them all locked up with growing and scaling their business to a level that they achieve or they want to achieve.
yeah.
So that's what I
That's
hear you saying is so needed.
Yeah, 100%. Because there's just such a lack of trust these days, and for good reason, because we don't necessarily believe what we read because we know AI might have written it. We don't even know if a human even proofread it before it was published. And we see photographs and even videos, and they look realistic. They look like the people they purport to be, but we'll see them of long past people. I saw one of Michael Jackson not so long ago. Obviously not him, is not here anymore. It's kind of fun and exciting to watch, but it's also terrifying because we don't trust what we see. We don't trust what we read. We need to look for other trust signals. And that's why trade businesses, contractors, are sitting on that gold mine of trust, because they do get out in the field and they do build solid relationships with their customers. Not all, of course. There's always good providers and not so good, but those that are doing a quality job, it's about amplifying that out to the masses so the masses can hear of the wonderful work you do. It's kind of like this microphone in front of me. It's getting my voice out there far and wide, but it's still my voice. It's not a fake voice. It's not an AI voice. It's my voice, and it's going through the online world, in this instance, the podcasting world, and being seen. So you've got to think about how do you get your projects out there in front of more people, and so you can be found, firstly, in your community, because most of us in trades and construction will be geographically bound as well. And that's good news, because you're not competing against everyone in the world. You're just competing against those in your area. And if you're in a small town, well, it's super easy because there's hardly any competition. In a city, it's a little bit more challenging, obviously, but there's ways around that too. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You're a, you are literally helping them build something that they would build in tangible form. You're building in
yeah,
digital form. You're building a digital bridge to get their voice out and to help them
yeah,
really transfer that value digitally. So that's
yeah,
super cool. And I think it's so important to do that. And I can just feel like the genuine care that you have, for the business and the industry, because you're seeing the pain. So let's talk a little bit
yeah,
about, and maybe there's some practical tips here as far as like, I don't know. I've seen some, things that people do with their websites and their marketing. And I've sat in some of those networking sessions where people are talking about how many different marketing agencies they've been through and the mistakes that really cost them just a ton of money.
mm.
And what are some of those costly mistakes that people are making that you've seen? Probably the top three that you're seeing that, happen. And why are you, how are you approaching that a little bit differently?
Yeah. So the search engine optimization is the biggest, oftentimes mistake. Can go horribly wrong, and that's so search engine optimization. I don't want to get too geeky, but it's an attempt to show up as highly as you can in Google for the phrases
Mm.
that match your business. So plumber, Melbourne for our region, and so yeah, there's all sorts of strategies that you can apply to try and show up really high in Google, but it's not just Google anymore. The same strategies apply to showing up in ChatGPT and all the AI platforms as well. So, so the attempt was they would just outsource it, and they would oftentimes be promised the world. Um, but it is a slow process of earning that authority and trust and reputation in Google's eyes. If you try and cheat your way to the top, eventually what happens is Google will realize what you're doing. It's called black hat SEO. So it's naughty things that you might do to try and rank higher than you deserve. And the temptation is for agencies to do some of that stuff because it sometimes can get you quick wins. The problem is if when you get found out, you get blacklisted and you can be penalized completely. So you no longer show up in Google at all. It might be for months, it might be for years, depending on how bad they think you've been. Normally, it wouldn't be a full blacklist. It would just be a downgrade of ranking. So, but in any case, it's really incredibly difficult to dig yourself out of that hole because, Google have penalized you. And so even if we were to try and do some quality SEO after that, because your reputation is tarnished, it's so difficult. So that would be the biggest mistake, outsourcing SEO without any understanding of what they're doing behind the scenes and getting trapped. You might spend thousands of dollars before you're even aware of what they're doing, and it might be working somewhat. And so you think, well, it's working, and then all of a sudden you fall off a cliff, and that's what happens. And then the person ends up going to another agency and saying, hey, do you mind helping me out with this? This is what's happened. Well, it's going to be incredibly hard. It's like swimming with lead around your ankles when you're in that scenario. So that's the biggest mistake often. But I think the other mistake is to be too generalized in your marketing message. So you really, and particularly for I mentioned those in a larger city, it's obviously more difficult because there's just so much more competition. But if you can be really specific in the niche you want to serve as your ideal client and target those people, you'll get other people by accident anyway, and that keeps life fun. Some things just outside of what is your ideal, that's perfectly fine. But if you target the very best type of client, you'll get more of them. And your very best next client is likely to look just like your very best client right now. So
Oh,
think about what
100%.
your client looks like right now. What do they do? What are the motives? What are the motivation? How do they think? And think whenever you're producing any marketing material, speak to that one or two people. Think about that one person in your mind when you're writing your content, when you're writing your marketing message, when you're writing your email campaign, whatever it is, have that person in mind. It's far easier if you have a one specific person in mind. That's what I like to do. And write as if you're writing to them, but you're writing to the masses, obviously, and there's other people just like them. So that's the quickest and easiest hack. I think, yes, so the mistake would be to be too generalist, and not niched enough, particularly in a large city. The third mistake, I suppose the biggest mistake would be just chasing the shiny objects, I would say. So there's so many tools and technologies and opportunities these days that are coming out rapidly because of AI. It feels like there's a new thing, a new widget released every day. And for us techie nerds, we geek out on all that kind of stuff.
We do, don't
But
we?
yeah, but it's not necessarily, it's definitely not the best outcome if you're swapping strategies too frequently. You've got to give something time to work and to optimize, because what you typically will do, depending on the nature of the strategy, you'll start and you'll refine and you'll tweak and adjust until it's working perfectly for your circumstance. If you don't work through that process, then you're just chasing the next thing and you'll probably never get the traction that you really could have done. So yeah, they're probably the three. There's lots of other mistakes you can make, but I think they're the three biggest ones.
Yeah, I think those are really practical, Wes. And I'm glad that we talked about that because I want to take us into a little bit more of a deeper practical dive because, what I've heard, especially with some of the trades, and I come out of the banking industry and you see them, dealing with cash flow challenges and their banking and their cash flow practice of their business. A lot of that is so they can get the supplies that they need. So they're juggling so much. And for the people that are in the trades and listening right now. They're in their commute, they might be in their truck, they're on a lunch break between jobs, just depending on whatever time zone that they're catching this episode. They don't have a marketing team. They may not even
Yeah.
have a budget. They have a hustle and a phone. And
Yeah.
that's usually
Yes.
what we see is we catch them in the middle and they're like, moving from job to job. And it's like, what's the single most important way that you connect with them today that they can like really gravitate and go, okay, I can fit this into my world. I mean, I've got all of these jobs. So, what is it that's a move that you can actually help them make right away?
Yeah. So I would say it depends on the size and scale of the business, but the founder, the person running the business, it's their business, and oftentimes it might be a couple running the business. They should be the direction and the overseeing of everything that happens. But it's ideal. Things like social media posting, it's so it can be so time consuming, and it's probably a massive distraction for the core things that you want to do. But it depends on the size of the business. But if you've got some form of administrative person in there, that really, really should be a task that they just do. But they need clear direction of precisely what your message is. And so that's the beauty of AI in that you can set up prompts. And I don't want it to sound too technical, but a prompt is just basic instructions in real words. So
Yeah.
write down exactly what your direction is of how you want to go about business, what your values are, your core convictions, and the service offering. and create a prompt. So just a large instruction that the administrative person can do. It can just come out of a conversation. They'll probably be able to do it with the founder and have a conversation. It's usually best if you're just starting to dabble in AI. I find it's best to speak to the device. So if you've got ChatGPT on your phone, speak to it just like a person and you can converse backward and forward. I think that might be only on the paid for version. But you just cover so much more information when you speak it out rather than trying to type everything in, and particularly if you're out on the field a lot, who's typing a lot? No one wants to do that, but you can just speak. Even when you're driving from job to job, site to site, you can speak to your phone and start to collate some of the core messages and then handball them to someone who can do the day-to-day grind of it all. That's not where your best time, that's not where you should be investing your time. So I forget what the question was, but hopefully that answered it.
No, I think that was a really good tip because, like, if they don't have a marketing team and they just need to get a couple of deals or a couple of
Yeah,
regular client contracts so that they can take that next level and break through this, this ceiling into the next
yeah,
level. I think that's so, and I think so kind of you to offer that. Do you mind if
good.
we explore a little bit, Wes? I want to take a little bit of a turn here and I want to talk
Yeah,
about there's a really big national conversation happening here in the US. And I have to imagine it's happening in Australia too. And it's about workforce development.
yeah,
And, just thinking about the job skilling, the types of macro trends that are affecting the trades. They thought AI wasn't going to affect the trades. What do you see from a marketer's point of view about the small contractors that are out there doing the work? They're building the projects that the communities need. They're trying to do all of the work with the workforce development, with the schools and the communities and the nonprofits. Like, how do you sit back and look at, the services that you bring to kind of, okay, I can help you fill gaps that you're seeing as well. Is that a
yeah.
conversation that's happening there in Australia too?
Yeah, certainly. It's I was at a seminar maybe 18 months ago now, and it was for trades and construction businesses. And so they showed some footage of robotics and AI being controlled from Australia. It was technology built in Australia, but controlling a
Mm.
project in Canada, building
Oh, wow.
a building, laying bricks, not just the printed. We see the 3D printed homes and so on, buildings, but this was actually picking up bricks and laying them to perfection. Like there was no human error because it's all robotic. I mean, someone has to go out and set up the system, but I saw everyone in the room, their eyes just lighting up thinking, if that's happening in that industry, even if it's not their precise industry, they could relate to it and think, okay, things probably will change. So I think everyone needs to be somewhat aware what the trajectory of the changes might look like in their industry. Now, maintenance-based work, and there'll always be a need. I think, well, for the medium term, there'll be a need for humans to get out there and do the work. But some
Sure.
of the tasks might change somewhat, and certainly behind the scenes, the office-based work that's going to change. That's going to be the first thing to change. So you just need to be aware and start to use some of the tools, just so you're familiar with them. Like if you're not, I mentioned before, if you're not on ChatGPT yet, I would encourage any founder just to get it and just to start speaking to it. And just so you can understand what its capabilities are, it's probably the easiest one to get an understanding of. And there's far more sophisticated things out there. But that's where I would start and just think about, okay, what does the trajectory of my industry look like? And what's likely to change in the office? And what's likely to change further on in the journey in the field. So, and how do you position yourselves like that? And for workers, so obviously the job displacement, it's a massive potential threat. I suppose it already is a threat. There's already been job
Yeah.
layoffs in different larger companies. Some are laying people off. Some are keeping their small teams, not laying anyone off, but growing rapidly just because the smaller team can do so much more. So I think it's a real time for the entrepreneurial minded person. So someone who can perceive and think about the future, because that's what entrepreneurs have always done. They've seen an opportunity and where there might be a need and value that you can bring. It's like income always follows value. so the greater value you can create, the more income you'll generally create as a business. So I think even employees should start thinking about that and bringing to their bosses, say, hey, I've noticed this is how we're doing this process, but I've seen an opportunity just over here that we could potentially apply to our business. I mean, even if the boss thinks it's a terrible idea, he's going to love you for bringing it to his attention, because it shows you're a go-getter and you're thinking about the business and you actually care about what you're doing. And so so there's no terrible ideas in those sorts of scenarios. I would say anyone concerned about their job loss, and probably most of us potentially should be, think about what extra value you can bring to the company that your boss might not have perceived quite yet. Bring it to their attention and you'll do just fine, either by applying the new strategy in, or by showing yourself as a caring person who actually cares how the business goes, and you'll flourish, they'll flourish. I think that's the way to think about it. The entrepreneurial minded person, even as an employee.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I talk about commerce. I use the word commerce, and you just
Yeah.
said it as well. It's like about a value exchange. And now what you just gave us is a great example of value exchange happening inside the company between team members, between owner and employee, before there's even a value exchange with the customers outside that the business is trying to serve. And I think we
Yeah.
lose sight of that. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, Wes, because I think that we as communities tend to forget about the currency that's flowing through us and as a current.
Yeah.
There's a current, there's trends that are happening, we can tap into the current. It's like a river flowing, and you can either get swept away or you plan to row right in a specific direction as far as where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of thought leadership that I sense you have, and I'm glad that we're able to kind of help share some of that for the perspectives that are really needed to just find balance in these kind of changing times, as far as where tech's coming in, it's affecting a lot of simplistic users. What other types of conversation points are you having with founders when it comes to just extending their voice online? Like, how do you get them past the I don't
Yeah.
like tech, I don't want to touch tech, but you can tell how passionate they are when they do their work?
Yeah. Yeah. So oftentimes it starts out for me when it's a new client coming on board is to have a conversation. We typically do it over Zoom and we can easily record that. And so the conversation is often, I've kind of flipped it a lot, because in marketing, you always want to find the key points of distinction because that's what makes a business unique. And so I always had those conversations, but you'd only ever really get surface level information. Like, there wasn't much substance, and everyone kind of said the same things. Like they really care about the customer and the you know, general kinds of things like that. But then I started having a conversation, and it's kind of came from studying a little bit psychology and shadow work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with shadow work, but it's the idea of
Mhm.
the shadow and the light. And so when you understand the shadow in everything, there's shadow in me as a person, there's darkness and light. There's darkness and light in businesses, there's darkness and light in industries. And so having the conversations, I never framed it with the founders that it was shadow work that sort of motivated it, but I would start to have them open up about their frustrations with their industry and what their concerns were about their internally in their business, and all of these things that highlighted to me what, was really emotionally important to them. But not that we would market to those negative aspects, but what it did is highlight what's the inverse and opposite to those things. They're the positive, that's the light. So I found people were really more open to have discuss those negative things. It was like a purging kind of session a little bit.
Oh,
And,
so
it's high
good.
stakes, it's high pressure, it's, stressful. There's things that go wrong. So on site, things are, bad, and they might be working in a heat, or they might be in the, rain, and that's, people are complaining. There's just so much pressures in the industries. So there's that high emotion of things, they're fully aware of what's going wrong. So to have those conversations, it just flowed naturally. And then it just shows us what we should start thinking about in terms of their marketing message. And once you've got a really clear concise, compelling marketing message, the thrust of everything you want to say and do, then everything else dovetails into that really easily. Everything else becomes more easy to produce. So even if it's writing blog posts, you kind of know if we're doing it on their behalf, we know what the direction is we're trying to take. And so we can produce the draft for them far more easily. And just everything's more streamlined once you have a really clear foundation from that point of view.
Yeah. I love that you talked about the shadow of work because, you're right. Every industry has its ups and downs and its light and the dark moments. And I
Mm.
think though, when I think of the trades and I'm female, so I'm like there's a lot of stuff that I can't do around my own house that I would love to have some support with and I do, but there's people that have to hire that out and they really, trust is a huge factor. But in
Yeah.
general, there's some of the toughest people that know how to come in and really do the hard chores and really figure out those puzzles of structural issues or
Yeah.
they're working in the hard climate sometimes. So, what would you say if you were to celebrate the resilience of the trades industry and the people that are in it? What would you
Yeah.
say is probably the most, just compelling story of a founder that you've been able to work with to really celebrate the essence of who they are as a business owner and a service provider to their community? Like, how do you bring out that resilience and that toughness but still in a
Yeah.
way that people want to do business with them?
Yeah. Yeah. There was actually a client. I won't mention their name because it's somewhat personal, but it's not even it's kind of business related. It's not what I do. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but I care about people. And so this particular client, he purchased his business and he probably overpaid to a high degree in that. And so it wasn't what he expected. And he was losing money month in, month out on top of the debt that he had incurred having bought the business. So I could see he was really, really struggling. And that happens in business sometimes through no fault of your own. Things just aren't quite as they should be, or things change. The other thing right now in Australia, we're having massive tax reform and so on, and that's not yet legislated, but it's likely to. So it's impacting the construction world dramatically. And so, changes happen and there's always going to be these ebbs and flows. Sometimes the changes, you have a windfall that you didn't really deserve, or it's not that you didn't deserve, but you didn't work toward it. It was just lucky. But other times you're unlucky. And that's just the nature of business, but the resilience to keep working through. So this particular guy that I mentioned, I could sense he was really quite in a low spot. And for a while there, he wasn't even really probably closing the work that he could, just because he probably didn't come across all that well. He might have come off a little gruff and grumpy, but he's just exhausted and depressed. So to work through that with him and to build out systems so that, firstly, that he needed to do less client-facing requirements. So we built some little systems in that basic proposals and quotes could be done quickly and easily online. So that reduced his need to talk to people and they get that constant rejection type thing. So they would get the basic. There was some custom required work which he would need to speak to them still, but for what he was delivering, for the most part, people could just find the offering they needed online, select it, make the booking, job's done. All of a sudden, I could see he was getting happier. They were small jobs, the ones that are auto, booked and so on. They were small jobs, but I could see he could sense they were turning around. And he was just so much more positive. And I knew from that point on, even the larger scale custom jobs, he would do much better at, just because he hit a turning point. So sometimes it's just about, when you're in a really rough time, figuring out how do you turn this around, even in a small way. And it might be just pivoting the business slightly. It might be about, if you've got no work at all, you used to do larger scale jobs. Maybe you build dream homes and all of a sudden there's no work. Maybe it's about trying to get some quicker wins to get the cash flow happening on some smaller renovation type scenarios. So I think all of those things, you've just got to be adaptable and flexible, because, sometimes you've just got to do what it takes to turn things around. And so, yeah, that guy, I'm really pleased for him that his business is flourishing right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a cool story too, because I heard, partnership, and I heard again this bridge builder in US, and I think that anybody that is probably listening probably picked up on that. Like it's not just let me get you through the motions of marketing. It's like let me really help kind of figure out where I can come in and help you the most with a blend of technology and human skills. So kudos to
Yeah.
you for seeing
Oh,
that
thanks.
opportunity. Any other closing thoughts as far as like what you really think, as far as like how, I mean, you're living your name, Uplift 360, 360 degrees, as far as like how you look at a business owner. We just heard a really cool, uplifting story, Wes. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think I suppose in tough times, the temptation is to cut costs, and definitely you should where you can, because, that's the quickest way to keep afloat is to remove expenses that you don't necessarily need. But oftentimes the temptation will be to cut back on your marketing too much. And you need to be wise about it. There's always balance in these things, but you don't want to turn the tap off that actually brings the work in. If it's the only thing bringing work in, you've got to really think about what aspects you turn off, and potentially sometimes you might even need to dial them up. It might feel a little bit counterintuitive sometimes, but sometimes you might need to invest a little bit more in a certain area of your marketing endeavors. And so that can be hard. That can be a hard decision. And I'm not in there. I'm not in anyone else's shoes. So I can't, I can't know precisely how they're feeling at any given time. But I know for a fact, um, the temptation to turn marketing off is sometimes the wrong decision. And so that's just the battle all of us need to face sometimes when things are tough, to think through, how do I save costs without turning everything off completely? Because the worst cost is to have a team of people who are not out in the field and you're paying their wages. So you've got to get them out in the field doing some works, even if it's not your ideal works right now. Get them out doing some things so you can then work toward the greater work in the future.
Right, right. And I think it's so important because evaluating, the different areas of your business it's a tough call sometimes. So,
Mm,
I appreciate you kind of raising that because you're right. I have heard, marketing or training or some of these things that you can cut, but then what's the cost of that? There's always a trade-off. There's
yeah,
always a trade-off. So, all
yeah.
right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. For everybody that's been listening here to Unlocking Commerce and Business, again, you can find us on Spotify and Apple and podcasts, all around the world, which is really so cool because we get to have people like Wes come and join us from across the world. But I think that if today's conversation moved something in you, share it. I think that, it's obvious, that there's a lot of opportunity that Wes can help you with within your trades business. Tag someone that might be struggling with technology or marketing or really understanding how to bring out, a lot of people call these boring businesses, but they're anything but because it's the human behind it. So, Wes, thank you for the work that you do in the community to keep our trades guys and girls moving forward. And until next time, stay curious and stay connected and keep building. So that's super cool. I'm really glad to have you on the show, Wes. Thanks again.
Thanks, Connie. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Unlocking Commerce and Business. If this conversation resonated, here's what you can do. Subscribe for weekly conversations with survivors, innovators, and changemakers, building regenerative alternatives to extractive commerce. Share this episode with collaborators, partners, funders, and changemakers in your network. The people ready for restorative commerce need to hear these voices. Drop a comment below. Tell us what patterns you're recognizing or what solutions you're building. We read every one. Commerce is everywhere, and healing extraction patterns inside our communities creates regenerative commerce outside. Like a lighthouse, we're here, exploring and cutting through fog, pointing toward what works. Welcome to the era of restorative commerce. Until next time, explore courageously, build sovereignly. You are the source and store of value. This is Connie Davis signing off. Thank you for being here.